It was an ordinary morning in June of 2003 when the Chinese paleontologist Xu Xing found himself completely frozen in front of a stone slab. His hands were shaking. He couldn't look away. There, perfectly sealed inside rock that was 100 million years old, lay something that challenged everything science had ever said about dinosaurs. It wasn't the size that unsettled him, nor the shape of the skull, not even the way the skeleton was positioned. It was something else, something that covered the creature's entire body. Something so delicate, so flawlessly preserved, it looked as if the animal had died only yesterday. Xu Xing closed his eyes, opened them again, and what he saw was still there, staring him down, daring him to explain the impossible. The team around him fell silent. Some instinctively stepped back. Others leaned in with a mix of fascination and scientific dread. Because what they were looking at shouldn't exist, not according to the textbooks, not according to decades of paleontological consensus. And yet there it was, preserved with a chilling clarity that would turn the next 20 years of paleontology into a scientific battlefield, where long-held certainties would collapse one by one. This isn't science fiction. It's the true story of a discovery that shook the foundations of what we thought we knew about our planet's past. A fossil so extraordinary, so unsettling, so revolutionary, that some scientists refused to accept it. Others tried to explain it away in increasingly desperate ways. And the boldest were willing to say what nobody wanted to admit. We'd been wrong all along. Today, I'm inviting you to uncover this mystery with me. I'm inviting you into a story of science, controversy, bruised egos, and uncomfortable truths. But before we begin this extraordinary journey, if you're fascinated by the mysteries of the past and the discoveries that change the way we understand the world, leave me a comment telling me what you think about fossils that challenge our beliefs. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single story like this one. Your like helps me more than you know. It's what allows me to keep bringing you high-quality content. Thank you. And now, get ready to meet the fossil nobody dared to explain. The context: China and the paleontological revolution. To understand the sheer magnitude of this discovery, we first have to travel to northeastern China, to Liaoning province, a region that, over the past 3 decades, has become the most important epicenter in the world of paleontology. It's not an exaggeration to say that Liaoning has completely transformed our understanding of how birds evolved and how dinosaurs actually lived, outshining even legendary fossil sites like Hell Creek in the United States or Patagonia in Argentina. So what makes Liaoning so special? The answer lies in a catastrophic event that took place around 125 to 120 million years ago, during the early Cretaceous. Back then, this region wasn't the industrial, densely populated landscape it is today. It was a realm of ancient lakes surrounded by active volcanoes. And when those volcanoes erupted, they didn't produce the dramatic rivers of lava we usually picture. They unleashed something far more lethal: pyroclastic flows. Pyroclastic flows are superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and pulverized rock that race down volcanic slopes at speeds that can exceed 700 kilometers per hour, with temperatures reaching 1,000 degrees Celsius. They're essentially impossible to outrun. When one of these flows slammed into an early Cretaceous ecosystem in Liaoning, death was instant and massive. Thousands of organisms, from dinosaurs to early mammals, from insects to plants, were buried within minutes under layers of ultrafine volcanic ash. That sudden death, followed by immediate burial, created the perfect conditions for extraordinary preservation. Because the ash was so fine, it seeped into every cavity, wrapped around every structure, sealed every tissue before decay could destroy it. Over time, that ash turned into a fine-grained sedimentary rock known as shale, acting like a flawless time capsule. The result is the Yixian Formation, one of the most important fossil sites on Earth, part of a broader geological complex known as the Jahol Biota. These deposits didn't just preserve bones, they preserved soft tissues that almost never survive in the fossil record. Stomach contents, eggshell membranes, reproductive structures, and most astonishing of all, detailed impressions of feathers, fur, and other skin coverings. In the early 1990s, when the first extraordinary fossils began appearing in local markets and eventually reached scientists, Liaoning became paleontology's goldmine. Every year brought new jaw-dropping discoveries. Dinosaurs with membranous wings, mammals gliding between trees, primitive birds, with claws on their wings and teeth in their beaks. But none of those finds prepared the scientific world for what was coming next. For decades, paleontologists had argued fiercely about the evolutionary link between dinosaurs and birds. The idea that birds descended from theropod dinosaurs, first proposed in the 19th century and revived in the 1960s and 70s by researchers like John Ostrom, faced serious resistance. Critics insisted that missing links were absent, intermediate forms that clearly showed the transition from scaly reptiles to feathered birds. The first major blow to that resistance came in 1996 with the discovery of Sinosauropteryx prima, a small turkey-sized theropod with filament-like structures covering its body. At first, scientists debated whether those structures were truly protofeathers or simply collagen fibers left behind as the skin decayed. But the evidence was compelling. Sinosauropteryx had a body covering that was neither typical reptilian scales nor fully developed feathers, something in between. That discovery opened the floodgates. In the years that followed, dozens of feathered dinosaur species were described from Liaoning. Caudipteryx, with feathers on its tail and arms, but incapable of flight. Microraptor, a tiny four-winged theropod. Dilong, an early tyrannosaurid draped in protofeathers. Each new find added another piece to the evolutionary puzzle, proving beyond any reasonable doubt that feathers didn't originally evolve for flight, but more likely for insulation or visual display. By 2003, the paleontological community had largely accepted that many theropod dinosaurs had feathers. The debate had shifted to finer points. Which groups had feathers? When complex feathers with barbs and barbules evolved? And whether large theropods like Tyrannosaurus rex kept feathers as adults or lost them the way elephants lose most of their hair. It was in this atmosphere, this scientific revolution already in motion, that Xing and his team found themselves staring at that extraordinary fossil in 2003. But what they saw that day wasn't just another feathered dinosaur. It was something far more unsettling, something that would push the debate into territories no one had anticipated. The discovery. When reality outruns imagination. The fossil reached Xing through channels that are common in Chinese paleontology. A local farmer had found it in a quarry while extracting stone slabs for construction. Sensing it might be valuable, he contacted middlemen who eventually sold it to a local museum. The museum, realizing the specimen was exceptional, reached out to Xing, one of China's leading paleontologists and a world authority on feathered dinosaurs. When Xing saw the fossil for the first time, he was immediately struck by how perfectly it had been preserved. The slab, light gray with beige tones, was roughly a meter long and about 60 centimeters wide. In the center, locked in a death pose, lay an almost complete skeleton of a dinosaur about the size of a large dog. But it wasn't the skeleton that demanded attention. Surrounding it, spreading out from every bone, covering literally every inch of the animal's body, was a dark halo. At first, under the lab's dim lighting, it looked like nothing more than a stain in the rock. But when Xing brought a stronger light closer and examined the halo with a magnifying glass, he felt his blood run cold. The halo was made up of thousands, maybe millions, of delicate filament-like structures. These weren't simple filaments like the ones seen in Sinosauropteryx. These were feathers, fully developed complex feathers with a central shaft, barbs branching outward, and barbules extending from those barbs, exactly like the feathers of modern birds. There were contour feathers covering the body, longer feathers along the arms forming unmistakable wing-like structures, and tail feathers arranged in a fan pattern. The preservation was so exquisite that in some areas, you could even make out microscopic structures tied to coloration. But there was more. The animal had a large, sturdy head, with powerful jaws packed with conical teeth sharp as blades. Its eye sockets were large, suggesting keen vision. The neck was relatively short but muscular. The arms were long, ending in three-fingered hands, each finger armed with a curved, razor-sharp claw more than 5 centimeters long. The hind legs were massively built and powerful, and on the second toe of each foot sat an enlarged, sickle-shaped claw over 10 centimeters long. Xu instantly recognized the overall anatomy. This was a dromaeosaurid, a member of the theropod family that includes the famous Velociraptor and Deinonychus. Dromaeosaurids were agile, sophisticated predators, probably among the most intelligent dinosaurs that ever lived, with relatively large brains and complex hunting behavior. The sickle claw on each hindfoot was their signature weapon, used to slash prey during coordinated pouncing attacks. But no dromaeosaurid known at that point had ever been found with such an extensive, exquisitely preserved feather coat. The few dromaeosaurids with feather evidence showed only partial impressions or simpler structures. This animal was feathered from the tip of its snout to the tip of its tail, feathers as complex and refined as those of many modern birds. Xu spent the following weeks meticulously examining every square centimeter of the specimen. He took hundreds of photographs under different angles and lighting conditions. He consulted colleagues who specialized in feather structure. He ran scanning electron microscope analyses on some of the feather impressions, revealing microscopic details in their architecture. Every test said the same thing. These were true, fully developed feathers, indistinguishable in basic structure from the feathers of modern flying birds. But there was a massive problem, the kind of problem that keeps a scientist awake night after night. This animal, with its magnificent plumage and full insulation, was a specialized predator about the size of a wolf. It likely weighed somewhere between 20 and 25 kilograms. Its hind legs were heavy and muscular, built for power rather than extreme speed. And its arms, though long and wing-like, were clearly too small and too weak to support the animal's weight in flight. The structure of its sternum and shoulder girdle lacked the specialized features needed for flapping flight. This animal couldn't fly. Absolutely, unequivocally, it could not fly. So why did it have such elaborate, fully developed feathers? Why invest that much evolutionary energy into building such complex structures if they weren't being used for flight? Modern feathers are incredibly expensive to produce in terms of energy and nutrients. They require specialized proteins, complex keratins, and constant upkeep. Living birds spend hours every day preening. In evolutionary terms, costly structures don't persist unless they deliver benefits big enough to outweigh their cost. Xu knew this question would shake paleontology. For years, the dominant paradigm had been that feathers evolved for flight, or at least for gliding. Simple protofeathers may have begun as insulation, but the leap to complex feathers with barbs and barbules was assumed to be driven by selection for flight capability. This fossil turned that paradigm upside down. Here was a ground-dwelling animal, a running predator that hunted on land, that never flew or glided, yet it possessed some of the most complex feathers ever found in any non-avian dinosaur. Xu named the specimen Sinosauropteryx millenii, the Chinese bird lizard of the millennium, honoring the new millennium in which it was discovered. The name was fitting, and also, in a way, ironically misleading. This wasn't truly a bird lizard. It was something stranger, a dinosaur that had independently evolved many bird-like features, including complex feathers, while remaining fundamentally a terrestrial predatory dinosaur. When the discovery was published in 2003, it caused an immediate sensation in the paleontological community. The most prestigious scientific journals competed to publish the paper. Media outlets worldwide covered the story. But along with the excitement came something else: skepticism, controversy, and in some circles, outright denial. The controversy: when science meets disbelief. The initial reaction to Sinosauropteryx millenii was mixed, and that's putting it politely. Some paleontologists, especially those at the forefront of the feathered dinosaur revolution, welcomed the discovery with real enthusiasm. Here was clear, spectacular evidence that complex feathers had evolved in contexts unrelated to flight. It supported alternative theories about what feathers were originally for: insulation, visual display, socially, signaling, egg incubation. But other scientists, particularly members of the old guard who had spent decades studying the evolution of flight, were deeply skeptical. Their criticism took several forms, some scientifically fair, others bordering on desperation. The first line of attack focused on preservation. Some argued that the feathers might simply be artifacts, products of decay or geological processes that created feather-like patterns without being true feathers. They pointed to earlier cases where supposed soft tissues turned out to be pseudofossils or modern contamination. Zhu Xing and his team responded with exhaustive analyses. They used scanning electron microscopy to examine the structures at a microscopic level, revealing feather ultrastructure that could not be replicated by decay or taphonomic processes. They compared the impressions to modern feathers and to other well-established feather fossils. Every comparison showed the same hallmark traits of true feathers: a central shaft with distinctive morphology, hierarchical branching into barbs and barbules, overlapping patterns consistent with bodily insulation. Even more convincingly, they ran chemical tests to detect traces consistent with beta-keratin, the specialized protein that forms feathers, in the fossil impressions. The original keratin had long since degraded, but it left behind distinctive chemical signatures that could still be detected. Those signatures appeared in the feather impressions and were absent in the surrounding rock, confirming these structures were genuine remnants of keratin-rich biological tissue. The second line of criticism was subtler and potentially more devastating. Some scientists questioned the anatomical interpretation. They suggested Sinornithosaurus might not have been a terrestrial dromaeosaurid after all, but a close relative of early birds that did have some capacity for flight or gliding. Maybe the flight adaptations weren't obvious because of incomplete preservation, or because key structures were cartilaginous and didn't fossilize. That critique was harder to crush completely, but Zhu Xing and his colleagues presented multiple lines of evidence against it. First, Sinornithosaurus's postcranial anatomy clearly matched a land animal. Limb proportions, pelvic structure, the curvature of the foot claws, everything pointed to an animal adapted for running and jumping on the ground, not flying or climbing trees. Second, the estimated weight, based on volumetric reconstructions of the body, was simply too high for sustained flight, given the wing surface area available. Physics doesn't negotiate. To fly, an animal must generate enough lift to overcome its mass, and that demands a specific relationship between wing area and body weight. Sinornithosaurus missed that requirement by a wide margin. Third, the sternum, the breastbone where flight muscles attach in birds, lacked the prominent keel found in flying. Birds. That keel is essential because it provides the attachment area for the huge pectoral muscles that power flapping. Without it, powered flight is impossible. But perhaps the most revealing pushback wasn't scientific at all. It was emotional. At conferences and symposia, some older paleontologists openly admitted their discomfort. This makes no evolutionary sense, one would say. Why would such complex feathers evolve without the selective pressure of flight? Another would ask. One particularly memorable statement at a conference went, "I'd rather wait for more evidence before rewriting textbooks based on a single fossil, no matter how spectacular it is." That resistance revealed something profound about how science actually works. Despite the ideal of objectivity, scientists are human, and humans get attached to their theories, especially when they've invested decades of their careers building and defending them. The idea that complex feathers evolved for flight had dominated for so long that many simply couldn't or wouldn't let it go, even in the face of contradictory evidence. But science also has mechanisms for overcoming that inertia. One of the most powerful is the accumulation of evidence from multiple independent sources. And that is exactly what began to happen in the years that followed the publication of Sinornithosaurus. More discoveries. When one fossil becomes a pattern. If Sinornithosaurus had been a lone, isolated anomaly, Its impact might have stayed confined to niche academic debates, but paleontology has a way of validating or burying controversial claims. More fossils. Between 2003 and 2010, a cascade of new discoveries from Liaoning and other fossil sites confirmed and expanded the pattern Sinornithosaurus revealed. What had looked like an anomaly became a trend, and that trend became a scientific revolution. In 2007, scientists described Epidexipteryx hui, a small pigeon-sized theropod with 4 astonishingly long ornamental tail feathers, each over 20 centimeters, more than twice the length of its body. Those feathers were clearly for display, not flight. The animal had short arms without flight feathers and a squat body ill-suited for flying. Yet its tail feathers were spectacularly complex, with well-developed barbs forming ribbon-like structures. In 2009 came Anchiornis huxley, a small late Jurassic theropod from China, about 10 million years older than Sinornithosaurus. Anchiornis was covered in feathers, including long feathers on both arms and legs that formed 4 wings. But unlike Microraptor, which likely could glide, Anchiornis had body proportions suggesting little to no true flight ability. Most incredible of all, researchers reconstructed its feather coloration by analyzing melanosomes, pigment-containing organelles. Anchiornis turned out to have dramatic black and white plumage with a red crest on its head, a pattern clearly designed for visual display, not flight. In 2012, Eutyrannus huali was described, an early tyrannosaurid 9 meters long, weighing around 1.4 tons, making it the largest feathered animal ever discovered. The fossil showed extensive patches of filamentous protofeathers covering its body. Eutyrannus was obviously a ground predator, incapable of any form of flight. Its feathers could only have served as insulation in the colder early Cretaceous climate of Liaoning. Each of these discoveries reinforced the same message. Complex feathers were not exclusive to flying animals. They evolved across a wide range of theropod dinosaurs, from small tree dwellers to gigantic land predators, in contexts that clearly had nothing to do with flight. But perhaps the biggest shock arrived in 2014 with Colindadromeus zabaicalicus, a small ornithischian dinosaur from Siberia. This was revolutionary because ornithischians are a completely different dinosaur group, not closely related to theropods or birds. Ornithischians include famous dinosaurs like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and Iguanodon. Up until 2014, the assumption had been that only theropods evolved feathers. Colindadromeus shattered that assumption. This small herbivore had 3 different types of skin coverings: scales on its legs, simple filamentous structures on its body, and more complex feather-like structures on its arms and legs. The implication was staggering. Either feathers evolved far earlier in dinosaur history and were present in the common ancestor of all dinosaurs, or they evolved independently multiple times. Either possibility was revolutionary. If feathers were ancestral to all dinosaurs, then potentially many dinosaurs, including some of the most iconic, could have had feathers at some stage of life. If feathers evolved independently in multiple lineages, then feathers weren't a one-off adaptation tied to flight, but an evolutionary solution different groups kept arriving at to solve shared problems like thermoregulation or visual communication. These discoveries completely reshaped the debate. By the mid-2000s, the paleontological community had largely accepted that complex feathers did not originally evolve for flight. The emerging consensus was that feathers first evolved for functions like insulation, waterproofing, camouflage, and, crucially, visual display and social signaling. The function of feathers, rediscovering their purpose. Once scientists accepted that complex feathers could exist in non-flying animals, the question shifted from how is this possible to why did these structures evolve? That question forced paleontologists to re-examine their assumptions at a fundamental level and develop new theories supported by evidence from multiple disciplines. The strongest theory today is that feathers originally evolved for thermoregulation, based on multiple lines of evidence, including isotope studies, bone structure, and the anatomy of the heart and lungs. Theropod dinosaurs were warm-blooded, or at least had elevated metabolisms comparable to modern birds and mammals. Maintaining a high body temperature requires insulation to prevent heat loss, especially in temperate or cold climates. Mammals evolved fur for this. Theropod dinosaurs appear to have evolved protofeathers. At first, these were simple filaments, more like mammal hair, that trapped a layer of air close to the skin, reducing heat loss through convection. Once those simple protofeathers existed, natural selection could refine and elaborate them for additional functions. That's where visual display and social signaling come in. Dinosaurs, like their descendants the birds, were visually oriented animals with color vision. The ability to produce distinctive visual patterns in plumage would have been immensely valuable for communication within a species. Display feathers could have been used for sexual selection. Males with more elaborate, brighter plumage might have been preferred by females, much like peacocks today. That alone could drive powerful selection for increasingly complex and colorful feathers, completely independent of flight. They could also have helped with species recognition in ecosystems where multiple related species lived side by side, or with status signaling within social groups, advertising dominance, health, or genetic quality. And in some cases, certain plumage patterns might have helped predators stalk prey or helped prey avoid being seen. Direct survival benefits through camouflage and concealment. Melanosome analyses in fossils have revealed that many feathered dinosaurs had strikingly complex coloration patterns. Anchiornis, as we mentioned, wore bold black and white plumage with a red crest. Sinosauropteryx had a tail with alternating reddish and pale bands, similar to modern raccoons. Microraptor had glossy black iridescent feathers that shimmered blue and green in certain light, much like modern crows. These elaborate patterns only make sense in the context of visual communication. They offer no advantage for flight, and in some cases, they could even be a liability by making the animal more visible to predators. But in the context of sexual selection and social signaling, they make perfect evolutionary sense. Another proposed function for feathers in non-flying dinosaurs is egg incubation. Modern birds use their feathers to create a warm, stable microenvironment for their eggs. Theropod dinosaur fossils have been found in brooding positions, bodies draped over nests, feathered arms spread over eggs in a protective posture. One famous example is Sitipati osmoskai, an oviraptorid from late Cretaceous Mongolia, found in exactly this pose, with feather impressions visible around the nest. That incubation behavior would have created strong selection pressure for larger, more efficient feathers on the arms, structures that looked increasingly like wings but served no flight function. They were simply better blankets for keeping eggs warm. And interestingly, this incubation theory connects elegantly to the eventual origin of flight. If forelimbs had already evolved wing-like feather surfaces for brooding, those structures were already there, available to be repurposed for other uses, including gliding and eventually powered flight. This is a perfect example of exaptation, when a structure evolves for one function and later gets co-opted for another. Flight, rethinking its origin. Accepting that complex feathers evolved independently of flight required a full re-evaluation of how birds evolved flight in the first place. If feathers were already present in ground-dwelling dinosaurs, then the story couldn't simply be feathers evolved and then animals could fly. It had to be more complicated. The new narrative is far more nuanced and multi-layered. It suggests that avian flight evolved through a series of stages, each driven by its own selective pressures and adaptations. Stage 1. Thermoregulation. Simple protofeathers evolved in small theropod dinosaurs for insulation, likely in the Middle Jurassic or even earlier. Stage 2. Elaboration for display. Protofeathers became more complex and diverse, developing branching and structures that created striking visual patterns, driven by sexual selection and social signaling. Stage 3. Expansion of surfaces. In some lineages, especially those spending time in trees or rocky environments, feathers on the arms expanded into larger surfaces, possibly for egg incubation or as part of display behaviors like courtship. Stage 4. proto-wings for aerodynamic control. Small tree-dwelling theropods, leaping between branches or dropping from heights, would benefit from anything that helped control descent. Proto-wings, even too small for flight, could stabilize jumps and slow falls, reducing injury risk. Stage 5. Gliding. With larger wing surfaces and slight skeletal modifications, some lineages develop the ability to glide from trees or elevated places, gaining immediate advantages for escaping predators, capturing prey, or moving efficiently through forests. Stage 6. Powered flight. Finally, in the lineage leading to modern birds, the specializations for flapping flight evolved. A keeled sternum for anchoring powerful pectoral muscles, shoulder girdle changes to allow the necessary motion range, reduced weight through pneumatic bones, a shortened tail, and continuous refinement of feathers into efficient aerodynamic surfaces. This step-by-step model explains why so many dinosaurs show in-between traits that don't fit neatly into flying versus not flying. Anchiornis, with 4 wings, but proportions unsuitable for sustained flight, likely sat in stage 4 or 5, using proto-wings for control during leaps rather than true flight. Microraptor, with a more refined anatomy, likely sat in stage 5, capable of efficient gliding, but not prolonged, flapping flight. Sinornithosaurus, the fossil that helped ignite this shift in thinking, likely belonged around stage 2 or 3. Its complex feathers were mainly for display and perhaps incubation, with maybe some secondary benefits for maneuvering during jumps and hunting. This richer view of feather evolution has also changed how scientists approach an old debate. Did flight evolve from the ground up, the cursorial theory, or from the trees down, the arboreal theory? The newer evidence suggests that this is a false choice. Different feathered dinosaur lineages likely experimented with both routes, some developing gliding from trees, others evolving controlled leaping from the ground. The lineage that led to modern birds may have incorporated elements of both. Broader implications. Rewriting prehistory. The discovery of Sinornithosaurus and the wave of related finds that followed has implications that go far beyond the evolution of feathers and flight. It has forced a fundamental reimagining of what life actually looked like in the age of dinosaurs. Popular dinosaur reconstructions have changed dramatically. Where we once imagined scaly, reptile-like creatures, we now see animals covered in feathers, with vivid colors and intricate patterns. Dromaeosaurids, portrayed in films like Jurassic Park as terrifying, scaly reptiles, are now reconstructed with feathered crests, wing-like forelimbs, and ornamental tail fans, looking more like giant ground birds than lizards. That visual shift comes with a shift in our understanding of dinosaur behavior. Animals with elaborate display feathers likely had complex social lives. Courtship rituals, dominance hierarchies, parental care. Many behaviors we associate with modern birds were probably present in many theropod dinosaurs. Dinosaur fossils found brooding over nests, like the oviraptorids mentioned earlier, are now interpreted as evidence of advanced parental care. These dinosaurs weren't simply laying eggs and abandoning them like many modern reptiles. They were actively incubating them, regulating temperature, protecting them from predators, and likely caring for hatchlings after they emerged, possibly feeding and guarding them for extended periods. This picture of dinosaurs as attentive parents with complex social behavior aligns far more closely with birds than with modern reptiles. And it makes sense, because birds are dinosaurs, the only surviving branch of a lineage that dominated Earth for over 150 million years. The behaviors we see in birds today didn't appear out of nowhere when birds evolved. They're inherited traits, carried forward from dinosaur ancestors. This discovery also reshaped how we understand dinosaur physiology. Feathers used for insulation strongly reinforce the conclusion that at least many theropod dinosaurs were endothermic, warm-blooded. Cold-blooded animals don't need insulation. In fact, insulation would work against them because they rely on the sun to warm up. Feathers only make sense for animals producing their own metabolic heat and needing to retain it. A higher metabolism would trigger cascading implications for everything about these animals. their food requirements. Warm-blooded animals need far more energy. Their activity levels, they could sustain movement in ways reptiles can't. Their geographic range, they could live in colder climates. And their ecology, they could be active, persistent predators rather than slow ambush hunters. The final lesson, scientific humility. The story of Sinornithosaurus and the feathered dinosaur revolution teaches a profound lesson about science and human knowledge. For decades, scientists had built a seemingly solid paradigm about how feathers and flight evolved. It was based on the best evidence available at the time, shaped by brilliant and dedicated researchers. And yet, it was fundamentally incomplete. One single fossil, preserved by a geological stroke of luck in early Cretaceous volcanic ash, was enough to challenge and ultimately dismantle that paradigm. That's both humbling and thrilling. Humbling, because it reminds us that our understanding of the past is always provisional, always subject to revision when new evidence appears. Thrilling, because it means there is always more to discover, more surprises waiting inside the rocks. The initial resistance to Sinornithosaurus also reveals the limits of human thinking. Even scientists, trained in skepticism and objectivity, can cling to beloved theories when confronted with contradictory evidence. That isn't always bad. Healthy skepticism helps prevent unsupported ideas from being accepted too quickly. But it has to be balanced with openness to genuine revolutions in understanding. The key is to let the evidence drive the conclusion, not the other way around. When multiple independent lines of evidence point in the same direction, when fossils from different sites, different ages, and different continents all tell the same story, it's time to revise our theories, no matter how comfortable or established they feel. Conclusion: the fossil that changed everything. When Xuxing stood frozen in front of that fossil in 2003, he couldn't have fully imagined how drastically it would reshape our understanding of prehistory. Sinornithosaurus millenii, covered head to toe in complex feathers, with an anatomy clearly built for life on the ground, was the piece of evidence that finally cracked the dominant paradigm about feather evolution. Today, more than 20 years later, the revolution sparked by that fossil has run its course. Textbooks have been rewritten, museum reconstructions have been updated, films and documentaries now depict feathered dinosaurs instead of scaly ones, and scientists have developed a far richer, more nuanced understanding of how birds evolved from dinosaur ancestors. But maybe the most important thing Sinornithosaurus has given us is a reminder to stay open to the possibility that we might be wrong. Earth's past is vast and complex, and we've barely scratched the surface. Every year brings discoveries that challenge our assumptions and force us to rethink what we thought we knew. There are millions of fossils still waiting to be found, buried in rocks around the world. Each one has the potential to reveal secrets about the history of life on our planet. Some will confirm what we already know. Others, like Sinornithosaurus, will force us to rewrite the books. That's the beauty of paleontology and of science in general. We never stop learning. We never reach a point where we can say, now we know everything. There are always more mysteries to solve, more questions to answer, more extraordinary fossils waiting to be pulled from the earth by some lucky farmer in a remote quarry in China. And that, time traveler, is what makes this pursuit so exhilarating. We never know what discovery will change everything. Tomorrow. We never know which fossil will be so extraordinary, so unsettling, so revolutionary that no one dares to explain it until they have no choice. If this story of discovery, controversy, and scientific revolution fascinated you, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible journeys into the deep past. Leave me a comment telling me what you think about how a single fossil can completely transform our understanding of prehistory. And turn on notifications so you don't miss the next paleontological mystery. Your support means the world to me, and it's what allows me to keep bringing you these stories. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey, and I'll see you in the next adventure through time.